All right, just hearing, again, some of these details. Tough so early in the morning, especially to hear what this little child went through. I want to bring in my guest this morning, Marni Joe Snyder, a little out of sorts after listening to that criminal defense attorney. This is a tough case. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on what we've heard so far.
I mean, this is a really out of the box case. Most cases that involve child death many cases that involve child death are not really about the parents completely ignoring or wanting to hurt a child. Often they're from people who are uneducated, have frustration in child rearing, and there is some sort of accident that turns into something worse. Sometimes it is one caregiver abusing a child when the other caregiver doesn't know. This is an incredible case of neglect, and it is really, really hard to listen to, and seems very clearly to be first-degree murder when you listen to these two witnesses.
And I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to describe to the viewers what they're seeing. See, that's Zachary Keene. They actually had another child, and this is him during a police interview, the camera from the police officer. And what makes this case just so heartbreaking is, from what we understand, they actually took pretty good care of that other child.
It just makes it even more bizarre, because like you just heard that last witness talk about, this is not from, wow, this is strange, our preemie, after one day of us messing up, seems to have gotten sick. This was many days of neglect, malnutrition, dehydration, and seemed to completely ignore this child.
Very, very, very awful. Okay, we have more testimony from this case, and believe it or not, Zachary Keene, the defendant, took the stand in his own defense during this trial and tried to explain away to the jurors why he was not responsible for what happened. Hear this. Stay with us here on the Law&Crime Network. All right, that was Zachary Keene on the stand in his own defense. Marni Joe Snyder on the line with me. Tell me your reaction to his defense to this crime.
It just seems so ridiculous that he checks on him but doesn't touch him enough to know that he's starving to death and covered in maggots is insane. And when a baby cries, kind of everyone knows, especially someone who's taking care of his older children who are okay, that you're looking for diaper, food, water, like the needs of a child that can't communicate. So the idea that he pushes him in this swing, he thinks it's normal that every time he looks at his kid for a week, he's in a swing and that's okay with him, is absolutely absurd.
It's and that aside, I mean, this child hadn't been changed in days. I'm sorry, in a small house, walking right where he slept right next to the room where this child was.
Right.
You're going to smell something. Right.
I mean, this is, really graphic to explain, but the baby is starting to decompose. Is like kind of, the smell would be ridiculous. The looking at the child, you would be able to tell. This is a visual that brought an officer to tears. And so there's something very, very wrong in this family that doesn't have to do with poverty and lack of education and the kinds of things that lead to accidental child deaths. This is just awful.
Yeah, this really takes it a step beyond that. But unfortunately, child abuse, child neglect is something that too many children across the United States and beyond are facing. So as hard it is for us to highlight what's going on, honestly, it's kind of important for our viewers to know, because I think a lot of this gets hidden in the weeds and people don't really want to realize what's going on next door in their neighborhoods.
Right. Well, thankfully, a lot of the abuse and neglect doesn't lead to death, but it's something that we need to have our eyes opened, because there are children that need to be saved, that you need to start looking for the signs that are important. So it really is. It's very important, and we have to make sure that parents are supported so that in the accidental cases, they learn how to take care of their children properly.
And I think a lot of us were very surprised that Zachary Keene, who you see there, took the stand in his own defense, because it's one of these cases that if you just hear the details, you heard from the medical examiner, one of the first responders from the sheriff's department, the kind of taste that the jurors are getting of this case is really hard to ignore. Then to have the father take the stand and hear his voice, I think would make the jurors almost hate him even more. So I think it was such a risky strategy. Perhaps he insisted on doing it. Perhaps that was really his only defense. But either way, I don't think it went over very well. Marni, stick around with me. We're going to continue to cover this case and get into the closings. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. All right, there is the defense's case. Marni Jo Snyder has been watching with me. We heard from Zachary Keene himself, and then we heard from the defense attorney during those closings. Listen, we all know what happens in this case. We will play the verdict in just a minute. But what kind of difficulty did that defense attorney have in trying to present to the jurors some kind of plausible explanation for what happened here?
He tried to toe the line between blaming the mom as the perpetrator, meaning saying she's the first-degree murder killer, and kind of excusing both of their behavior by saying, you know, he thought the mom was doing better, she was a mess. Mom probably thought he was helping, she was on drugs, didn't know any better. So it's hard because he's almost defending the mom that's not even there when he's supposed to be pointing the finger at her. And that just might be the situation that his client and his client's testimony put him in, but it's certainly a hard one.
All right, well, let's listen now to the verdict and see how, look specifically how Zachary Keene reacted. Thanks so much, Anthony. Let's now turn to the turmoil at USA Gymnastics. We're just getting word that they have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy because they're dealing with so much scandal and so many claims surrounding their handling of the Larry Nassar abuse scandal. Of course, dozens and dozens of women have filed claims against USA Gymnastics, claiming that they did not do enough to protect these young girls. When they found out about what Larry Nassar had been doing, of course, he was convicted on several charges and has been accused of abusing dozens of women. I want to bring in Marni Jo Snyder. I know you've been reading up a bit on this case. One of the interesting things about USA Gymnastics filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy is that it actually freezes many of these civil lawsuits that have been filed against USA Gymnastics. Many folks would say, wow, that is just horrible that some of these women are not going to get their day in court to make their claim against USA Gymnastics for what happened.
Right, and I think that's incredibly important to the victims. I think that, honestly, that could be a form of restorative justice for the organization if they were to allow women to have a voice and they were to rightfully say, you know, we messed up. Even if they fight the lawsuit, to give a day in court and to make it right, I think is incredibly healing, and that's not going to happen now.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's permanently put on hold. As the proceedings make their way through bankruptcy, one of the goals, according to USA Gymnastics, is to sort all the finances out and to make sure that the women who are owed claims get the money that they are due.
That's correct, and that's some sort of making these people whole, but I don't know that that's really the justice that they were looking for, and that's what we're going to have to find out.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the turmoil that happened at USA Gymnastics since the scandal emerged. And really, I think it's one of the biggest that's been brought to attention in the nation involving Larry Nassar. Just the number of claims against him, really staggering. And we here on the Law and Crime Network aired his sentencing, where I got to tell you, it was just so heart-wrenching to listen to all of these women, woman after woman, come forward and explain to the judge what this man had done to them. Then to hear about the turmoil that's been happening at USA Gymnastics and then also over at Michigan State University where he was practicing, it's really earth-shattering, the kind of ramifications for what happened here.
Well, and it's victimization over and over and over again, because we refer to them as women now out of a sign of respect for when they're in the courtroom, but these were children that he was preying on. His access was incredible. The numbers were sky high. And don't forget that during this abuse, sometimes their parents were there, very involved in their lives. So they also created a familial rift. And so these women have been victimized in a million different areas of trust. And now they're going to be victimized again. Now that they came forward and they're in the press and they're around, there's not going to be swift justice for them.
And as I mentioned, this did involve Michigan State University. Just about a week and a half ago, we covered here on the Law and Crime Network, the former president who you see there, Lana Simon, she was arrested. The president of Michigan State University was arrested for her role into this. She was accused of lying to investigators when they were conducting their investigation against Larry Nassar. And I got to tell you, when some of the women were addressing the judge during Larry Nassar's sentencing, they really pointed the finger at the MSU president for her role in ignoring and not doing enough to address what happened.
Right. And in my understanding of this community, and I am not a gymnast, but my understanding is that the community is very tight among parents entrusting their children to others to make them into star athletes. And so I have no doubt that this was a huge violation of trust for both parents and the gymnasts themselves.
Well, listen, we're going to continue to very, very closely follow this case. There's been development after development. As we just mentioned here, we're now learning USA Gymnastics filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which essentially puts all of these claims that dozens of women, I believe it's up to like 300 or more claims against USA Gymnastics, on hold while this case makes its way through bankruptcy court. Right now, USA Gymnastics has claimed between $50 and $100 million in assets, and then they're also claiming that same amount in liabilities. That doesn't mean, however, USA Gymnastics is going to go away. They are going to continue to operate. It's just that they need a bankruptcy court to get a hold and to figure out what they're going to do about all of these liabilities, specifically as it relates to these ginormous claims against them because of how they handled this Larry Nassar case. We have a lot going on here on the Law and Crime Network. We're going to take you back to some of the cases we're following in court. We're going to take a quick break and be back in just a few minutes. Okay, so this officer's testimony is pretty critical. He is the partner of one of the officers indicted facing charges in this cop cover-up trial, Mr. Gaffney, Officer Gaffney's partner. I want to bring in Marni Joe Snyder. Why do you think this guy testified both in the Jason Van Dyke case, and he also testified in this case that we're following now involving the 3 officers involved in the alleged cover-up? Why is his testimony so important?
Well, I think he obviously, based on his testimony in both places, being consistent and admitting things to the prosecution that seemed to make him a little uncomfortable, I think that he decided early on that he was going to be one of the police officers that tells the truth in this case. I don't know exactly what motivated him to do it, whether it was the prosecution or not. But he admits that these threats that people talked about in their reports never happened, that Laquan McDonald was pretty much walking away, that whatever trying to get up he did, we could see in the video, was struggling with 16 bullets inside of him and not getting up to attack anyone, that he's not superhuman. And so I think that this officer's testimony lends some credibility to the case. Like, he has credibility because he's coming out and he's telling the truth. And he can also give a really detailed version because he was one of the first officers on scene.
And that was what was so difficult about this case for these officers. At first, for a long time, the actual video that you're watching now was suppressed. The Chicago Police Department, the Emanuel administration, who was the mayor at the time, Rahm Emanuel, didn't want this video released to the public because it's pretty clear, if you look at it, this guy, what happened? I mean, there's really no question there.
No.
The question now in this cover-up trial is, are what these officers wrote in these reports claiming that Laquan McDonald was being aggressive, was putting Jason Van Dyke's life at harm. Is that enough to get them on criminal charges? And there's the victim there, Laquan McDonald. Weigh in, Marni. What do you think?
The prosecutor has a hard job in this case because some of the things that were going on here, right, is that they are saying that they made those lies up to really hurt the investigation. Well, some people might say, but it's on video, so eventually their clarification would have come out. People are not taking into account the important activism that's on the ground, from the activists that are marching to the civilians, to anyone who wants to have some transparency in their police departments. And that's why the video came out. So I think that the prosecutor needs to make sure that no one underestimates the fact that this cover-up could have really hurt the investigation. The truth might not have come to light. And that what these officers were doing was very dangerous, telling these lies in those reports.
Yeah, and this is really, from what I understand, the first time in Chicago where police officers have been accused criminally of a cover-up like this. There's always been assumptions, there's been disciplinary proceedings, but actually taking it before a judge in a criminal case has never been done before in Chicago. Okay, we got to take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network. When we come back, we'll take you back inside this case in Chicago. Stay with us. Okay, so in the police report, she apparently was quoted as saying he raised his arm as if he was attacking Officer Jason Van Dyke before Van Dyke fatally shot the teenager 16 times. Now, Marni Jo Snyder, she's on the line with me. That doesn't quite line up with what she told the jurors in both of the cases.
Not at all. And it's really a misquote of what she says that she told them, that she had been telling the truth from minute one, and that the officers changed her story in the police reports. And that's incredibly, incredibly important because she's been consistent through both of these trials, and she's trying to say that she had never said anything differently. She's remembering it as it happened, and obviously her story matches the video. So she is an incredibly credible witness.
Now, if these officers aren't found guilty of these crimes, what kind of message does that send? I mean, you take the law, I hate to say you take the law out of this, but we've talked about how it might be difficult for the prosecutors to prove their case here. But in terms of the general population, looking at a case like this saying, wait a second, so police officers can just write whatever they want to write about a case on a police report to frame it in whatever way they want and it's okay?
Right, and I think the message should be it's absolutely not okay. I mean, I'm glad that you pointed that out, though. It is a hard case for the prosecution because they have to show intent. They have to show that it's not just a mistake or sloppy paperwork by police officers, which happens when you're handling a lot of different cases. And so I don't know that I hope that people that are paying attention to this don't think that all hope is lost for accountability for police officers if this is not guilty. But I think it is very important for the prosecution to do their best to show the community that this is absolutely unacceptable behavior.
All right, let's listen to some more testimony from Dora Fontaine. All right, more testimony from Officer Dora Fontaine, who is really considered the prosecution's key and star witness in this cop cover-up trial. I want to bring in Marni Jo Snyder. What do we expect? Because in just a few hours, the defense is finally going to get their turn to put on their case. We know each of the officers, of course, has their own defense attorney. It could get very interesting. I know opening statements got a bit fiery. These defense attorneys very outraged that their officers, their clients, are charged here.
Yeah. Well, I think that they're going to have to discredit her. They're going to have to discredit the other partners. But these are partners of the officer. I think they have a big uphill battle there, despite the prosecution having the entire burden of proof. She was a very convincing witness, I thought, because she kind of showed this pained expression from, talking about the smoke that was coming off Laquan's body and the blood splatter. And you could tell that she was very disturbed by everything that had happened from the time that they responded to this call till the end, and is offended that her paperwork would have been changed like that, or her statements would have been changed. The other officer looked a little bit pained to testify against his partner,
right.
But I think that she was really phenomenal as a witness. So they're going to have to discredit her.
All right, Marni, stick with us. We're going to take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network, and we're going to take you to an update in the case that we've been following in Wisconsin against Len Kaczynski. Stay with us.